Bishops have long been fighting for the rights of immigrants here in the United States. While today's migration crisis is along the southern border, in the past, Europeans, including Irish Catholics, were discriminated against in this country. And a big fighter for Irish immigrants was New York's first Archbishop, John Hughes. Here to talk more about Archbishop Hughes is Catholic historian Richard McCann. Richard, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Richard, tell us a bit about what life was like for Irish immigrants during Archbishop Hughes' time.
Not very good. The Irish were fleeing probably the greatest cataclysmic social event of the 19th century, economic and social event, and that is, of course, the Great Potato Famine. Approximately 2 million people between 1845 and 1855 would either die of starvation or flee their native land as the result of famine. At first, they were received with some measure of sympathy, but then eventually they were viewed as different because compared to the native population in America at that time, which was principally a pretty solid Anglo-Saxon Protestant American background, they were viewed as different, and because of their religion, they were viewed as kind of a fifth column of the Pope, something very different from what had been the case in Republican America.
So Archbishop's nickname was Dagger.
Yes.
Why was he called that?
Well, you see, that was when a bishop signs his name, generally he puts a little cross next to his signature. And so Hughes' opponents and his detractors looked at that dagger, looked at that cross, and they saw it as a dagger. And because of Hughes' personality, he's a very, very sort of unrelenting defender of the rights of the Irish people, and he never feared going after their detractors and against the people that oppose Roman Catholics or immigrants generally. And so he was associated with that name Dagger because that's the way he sort of attacked.
And how did he use that, that personality to help people that were Irish immigrants?
Well, he was an unrelenting spokesperson for the downtrodden and for the reviled. He was in the forefront of establishing Catholic education in New York City for the purpose of making sure that Catholic children who otherwise would have been subjected to the daily revilement in the public school system against the church, against the Pope, against priests, had a place where they could go and to be educated. Otherwise, the alternative was they would have been on the street.
So knowing the kind of person that he was, how do you think Archbishop Hughes would feel about the status of immigration today?
Well, it's a complicated question, but there are two basic elements to this as I see. In line, of course, with Pope Francis and the Catholic Bishops' Conference, we have an obligation to be humane and to treat people who are migrating with humanity and with dignity, because most of the people who are crossing the southern border really are seeking better economic life for themselves and for their families. But there's also another side, which is the legalistic side. There is the observance of the rule of law and the observance of being able to immigrate in a legal and proper fashion, in an orderly type of fashion. Hughes, while very much a proponent of compassion for the Irish and for immigrants generally, was also a man who had a great deal of respect for Americanism, the Constitution, and the rule of law. So I don't think that John Hughes would have advocated or been very much support of a system where laws were flouted in order to achieve an end. But at the same time, he would have been the first person before the Congress testifying and reviling and going after both Democrats and Republicans who in Congress don't seem to be able to get together to solve this problem. He would have been really at them day and night to see why they can't come together to find a solution.
And just really quickly for me, what can we learn from his work in immigration?
What we can learn is that there is obviously a need to be compassionate. There is a need to recognize that people who are less fortunate we have an obligation to care for them, an obligation to allow them the opportunity to prove themselves in a society and to provide them with support to do that. But at the same time, we need an immigration system that, while it meets the needs of human beings, especially children, is one that's also in line with our laws and in line with what's sensible for the people who are trying to come here to better themselves.
Richard McCann, Catholic historian, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.